Imagine this: a man living among us, working, smiling, talking to people like nothing's wrong, while secretly, one by one, he's strangling his victims, then tossing their lifeless bodies into a cold, silent river, until the river itself becomes a witness to one of the most horrifying killing sprees in American history. This isn't a horror movie. It's not some twisted fiction. This is a true story. The story of Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. He confessed to murdering 48 women. But detectives believe the real number is much, much higher. In this episode, you're about to hear every detail, from his first kill to the chilling moment he was finally caught. But before we begin, brace yourself. Because after this story, you might never look at the people around you the same way again. It was a quiet morning on August 15th, 1982, when police in Washington state got a strange call. 2 bodies had been spotted floating in the still waters of the Green River, deep in King County, in the Pacific Northwest. Officers rushed to the scene. They immediately secured the area and began searching for any clue, any sign that might explain what had happened. Then, one of the detectives froze in his tracks. His eyes locked onto something near the riverbank, and what he saw chilled him to the bone. It was a 3rd body, but this one was different. It was grotesquely mutilated. The kind of brutality that couldn't come from just any killer. This wasn't random. This was the work of a monster. And just like that, the case took a terrifying turn. Because what they'd discovered wasn't just murder. It was the beginning of a serial killing spree. And the world would soon know the name Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Gary Ridgway was born on February 18, 1949. He grew up in a broken, chaotic household. A place filled with shouting, anger, and violence. He constantly witnessed his mother clashing with his father and relatives. Those early years were anything but normal, and the scenes of conflict played in his mind like poison on repeat. Like many who harbor dark urges, Ridgway's violent tendencies showed up early. At just 16, he did something unthinkable. He lured a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him in the chest. The boy miraculously survived. But no one seemed to understand how dangerous young Gary really was. He wasn't jailed because he was a minor, but that attack was just the beginning of a nightmare. Years passed. Ridgway went to college, then joined the military, and while he lived like a model soldier by day, by night, it was a different story. He plunged into a dark world of sex workers and late-night partying. Even after his military service ended, he kept up the same double life. A quiet day job, then wild, drunken nights in the shadows of the city, all while married. His wife didn't last long. Once she realized who her husband really was, she filed for divorce. But here's the strange part. Despite his twisted lifestyle, Ridgway thought of himself as deeply religious. He clung to the Bible, read it morning and night, cried during sermons. But what he hid in his heart was darker than anyone could imagine. Then came the moment where everything changed. One night, during one of his usual encounters, Ridgway was with a sex worker. When something inside him snapped, he suddenly lunged, grabbed her by the neck, and started to strangle her. He didn't want to kill her. Not yet. He just wanted to feel that power. She blacked out, and when she woke up, he was gone. But she didn't stay quiet. She marched straight to the police and told them everything. She even gave them his full name, Gary Ridgway. He was arrested. But it didn't last. The evidence was weak. And because it wasn't classified as attempted murder, he was released quickly. What the police didn't realize was that they had just set free a man who would go on to become one of the most prolific serial killers in human history. Just a few weeks later, July 1982, two young men were walking along the banks of the Green River when they saw a body floating in the water. It was badly decomposed and disturbingly disfigured. They screamed for help. Police arrived fast. At first, they thought it was just another murder, but they were wrong. This was the start of a nightmare. Victims would keep appearing one by one, all strangled, all dumped in the same place, the Green River. Police rushed to the scene after receiving the new report. Another body had been spotted floating on the surface of the Green River. They pulled it from the water immediately, and when the body emerged, the truth hit hard. It belonged to a 16-year-old girl named Wendy Caulfield. Wendy had been reported missing just days earlier. Now she had returned in the most tragic way imaginable. Not alive, but lifeless. At the morgue, the autopsy report revealed the horrific details. Wendy had been sexually assaulted, then deliberately and brutally strangled to death. At first, the police treated it as a one-off murder. Horrific, yes. But maybe, just maybe, it would be the last. They were wrong. On August 15, 1982, less than a month after Wendy's body was found, another call came in. Two more bodies had been discovered. Same place, same river. Once again, forensics teams were dispatched to the banks of the Green River. They began combing through the area, desperate to find anything. Any clue, any link that could lead to the killer. But what they found next changed everything. Because they didn't just find two bodies, they found three. Lying on the riverbank was a third corpse. Another young woman, dumped and discarded like the others. This wasn't random anymore. This was the beginning of something far more sinister. The three bodies were taken to the morgue, and soon their identities were confirmed. The first was 31-year-old Marcia Chapman. The second, 17-year-old Cynthia Hines. And the third, 16-year-old Opal Mills. That's when detectives began connecting the dots. There were chilling similarities. All the victims were women. All were young to middle-aged. And all were connected to sex work or the nightlife scene. Worse yet, each one had been sexually assaulted and then strangled to death. The pattern was clear. This wasn't some random killer on a spree. This was a serial killer. A calculated, methodical predator. Someone who chose his victims carefully, then murdered them with the same signature brutality every single time. At that moment, the police knew they were in over their heads. They created a special task force dedicated to one mission: monitor the Green River and hunt down the killer haunting its waters. It didn't take long before more bodies began to surface, more young women, more of the same horrifying details. The Green River had become a graveyard, a silent tomb for innocent lives. Then came a major shift in the case. A moment that brought the investigation into a new phase. On April 30th, 1983, a group of girls watched their friend Mary Malver get into a pickup truck with a strange man. His name was Gary Ridgway. Mary told her friends she was going to hang out with him that night. But after that, she vanished. She never came home. Her family was terrified and rushed to file a missing persons report. This time, the FBI stepped in. They launched their own investigation and immediately traced Mary's last known movements. Agents interviewed her friends, who described the man she left with. He was driving a pickup truck and looked to be in his 30s or 40s. That detail mattered. Pickup trucks weren't very common in the area at the time. And narrowing the list of owners gave investigators a much shorter list of suspects. One of the names that came up? Gary Ridgway. Police brought him in for questioning. They asked about Mary Malvar. He denied everything, said he didn't know her, had never seen her, and had no clue what happened to her. Then he went even further. He claimed he didn't know any of the women whose bodies had been found in the Green River. Unfortunately, police had nothing solid to hold him on. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses, no hard evidence. They had no choice. They had to let him go. But Gary Ridgway wasn't in the clear, not even close. Now, he was the prime suspect. And everyone in the task force, from local police to FBI agents, knew they were probably looking right at the man responsible for terrorizing Washington. But proving it would be a long and grueling journey. In May of 1984, detectives tried once again to confirm the growing suspicions around Gary Ridgway. They hooked him up to a polygraph, hoping the machine would catch the lies his face didn't show. But what happened next stunned them. Ridgway passed the lie detector test. Every answer appeared completely honest. To the investigators, it felt like a punch to the gut. Had they been chasing the wrong man all along? Disappointed, they decided to pull back and start looking elsewhere. That's when attention shifted to another man. A taxi driver named Melvin Foster. He lived just minutes from the Green River, the same river where nearly all the victims had been found. Melvin wasn't exactly a stranger to trouble. He had a long rap sheet and had spent time behind bars. That alone was enough to raise eyebrows. But there was something else. Something that truly made detectives nervous. Melvin kept calling the police, over and over, offering information about the river and the victims. And the way he talked? It felt like he knew too much. As investigators started digging into his life, they found some red flags. He lived right near the dumping site. He had regular contact with women similar to the victims. He had a criminal history. And worst of all, he seemed oddly involved in the case. To the detectives, it almost felt like he was watching the investigation from the inside. So they brought him in. During the interrogation, they pressed him about how he knew so much. Foster claimed the women often rode in his cab at night and shared stories with him. He swore he had nothing to do with the killings. But the suspicions wouldn't go away. Police placed him under 24/7 surveillance, convinced it was only a matter of time before he slipped up. Then, just as the investigation was closing in on Foster, a new call came in. Another body had been found. But this time, it wasn't anywhere near the Green River, and more importantly, it was discovered at a time when Melvin Foster was under constant police watch. There was no way he could have committed this murder. Just like that, the theory collapsed. So did the case against Foster. To be absolutely sure, they gave him a lie detector test too. He passed. Melvin Foster was cleared. But that left one terrifying question hanging in the air. If not him, then who? With more victims piling up, police ramped up their investigation. The fear was spreading like wildfire. This wasn't just a crime spree, it was turning into a national nightmare. And in the middle of all this chaos, one name kept echoing in the background. Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. Responsible for the deaths of over 30 women. Bundy had shocked the nation throughout the 1970s. By this point, he was already behind bars, awaiting execution. But when he heard about the Green River murders, Something about them caught his attention. He recognized a familiar pattern. The killer's behavior. It reminded him of his own. Bundy understood something the investigators were just beginning to learn. Serial killers often think alike. They share similar impulses, similar patterns, similar urges. When the FBI learned of Bundy's interest in the case, they realized they might have a rare opportunity. What if one serial killer could help them catch another? One day, as Bundy sat in his cell awaiting death, a team of FBI agents walked in. They looked him in the eye and said, "We heard you want to help us. Is that still true?" Bundy gave a slow, eerie smile, and then began to speak. He told them something disturbing, that the Green River Killer was likely returning to the bodies after killing them. Not just to make sure they were still there, but sometimes to violate them again. It was a horrifying thought. But it was also a major clue, because that kind of behavior pointed to a very specific type of killer. One with necrophilic tendencies, a psychological compulsion to interact with the dead. Bundy didn't stop there. He offered deeper insights. Thoughts about the killer's patterns, habits, and psychological profile. And strangely enough, his words helped. Bundy's twisted mind became a tool in the investigation. His comments helped shape the psychological profile of the man police were chasing. But this wasn't the end. Not even close. What Bundy revealed was just the beginning of what was coming next. As the body count continued to rise, police received yet another chilling report. 2 girls had vanished without a trace. They launched an immediate investigation, retracing the girls' last known movements until they hit a dead end. Both girls were last seen with one man, Gary Ridgway. For the second time, Ridgway's name surfaced in the case. But this time, things were different. Detectives were no longer brushing it off. The evidence was mounting, and it was becoming harder and harder to believe Ridgway was innocent. By now, over 40 bodies had been discovered. The pressure was intense, the fear overwhelming. Police raided Ridgway's home, searching for anything that could tie him to the murders. They didn't find much, but they did collect a saliva sample to compare against the biological evidence taken from the victims. Back then, though, DNA testing was still in its early stages. It lacked the precision and power we have today. And when they ran the test, no match. With no solid evidence, Gary Ridgway walked free, and for the next 10 years, he continued living like a normal man, while the Green River case spiraled deeper into darkness. But time has a way of catching up. By 2001, DNA technology had advanced dramatically. Accuracy had become nearly flawless. And with that breakthrough, detectives reopened Ridgway's file. They collected a fresh DNA sample and ran it again. This time, there was no doubt. It was a perfect match to several of the victims. In 2001, Gary Ridgway was arrested, and what followed was one of the biggest serial killer cases in U.S. history. During the investigation, police confronted him with a list of over 48 women. To their shock, Ridgway confessed. But here's what really chilled them. He couldn't even remember their faces or their names. He had killed so many. He forgot who they were. When it came time for trial, the entire nation was watching. Everyone expected the death penalty. But Ridgway's defense team made a bold move. They proposed a deal to the judge. Spare Ridgway from execution. And in return, he would fully cooperate. He'd confess to everything. Tell them how he lured each victim, when he killed her, and where he left the body. The judge agreed. The information he could provide was too valuable. Not just to close open cases, but to understand the twisted mind of a serial killer, and maybe save lives in the future. To carry out the interviews, the FBI brought in a top criminal psychologist. She would lead the interrogations. They were recorded, documented, and attended by law enforcement, federal agents, and behavioral analysts. And what Ridgway revealed was horrifying. He said the key to catching a victim was trust. He'd chat with them gently in the car, show them pictures of his son, pretend to be a caring father, a safe man. Once they felt at ease, he'd drive them to a remote spot, assault them, then strangle them to death. Ridgway confessed to killing 48 women in chilling detail, the ones he could remember. But investigators believed the real number was much higher. At least 71 victims, matching the number of missing persons reports during his killing spree. In the end, the judge delivered the final sentence. 48 life sentences, one for every known victim. And later, a 49th sentence was added, when another body was positively linked to Ridgway through DNA evidence. But even that wasn't the end. In 2023, and again in 2024, the remains of two more girls were discovered. One was just 15, the other 16, and both were confirmed as victims of Gary Ridgway. Today, Ridgway remains locked away in a Washington state prison, serving one of the harshest sentences in American criminal history. 49 life sentences. Think about that. Even if a judge someday reduced 2 or 3 of those sentences, he would still spend the rest of his life behind bars. And with that, the case of the Green River Killer was finally closed. But the questions still remain. What turns a man into a monster? And how many others like Gary Ridgway are still out there, hiding in plain sight? If this story shocked you, then you have to check out the story of Jack the Ripper, an equally disturbing mystery that still haunts the world to this day. And don't miss the haunting ghost plane incident, a chilling true story with documented evidence that will leave you speechless. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.